welcome to my channel. Today's story takes place in Seal Beach, California. The year was 2011. Seal Beach sits on the border of Orange County, just south of the Los Angeles County line. It is beautiful and considered one of the safest cities. Before this event in 2011, there had only been a total of 4 homicides since the year 2000. The last one was in 2010. At the time of this crime, the population was just over 24,000 people. Today, in 2024, the population is just over 25,000. Before I get into the tragic tale that took place at Salon Meritage, I want to share some information about this beautiful beach town. I cannot stress enough how beautiful and quaint this community is. This bed and breakfast called Seal Beach Inn and Garden stood on the corner of 5th Street and Central Avenue. It was built in 1924 and was the first bed and breakfast in Southern California. Sadly, the woman who owned it had to close in 2005 and sold it to a developer who demolished it in 2006. These 6 houses stand where it once stood. This view is looking west on 5th Street towards the ocean. This view is looking east on 5th Street towards where Salon Meritage is. You can literally walk there from here. This map shows it is a 1-minute drive down 5th Street. I have highlighted where the salon sits on the map. Just a couple more things about Seal Beach so you can get a feel of how amazing it is before we get into the darkness. If you were a fan of the soap Sunset Beach, you might recognize these 2 houses. The one my mom is in front of was used as the exterior of Ben's house on the left. The one on the right was used for Bet and Annie's house. Although there is a Sunset Beach not too far from Seal Beach, the exteriors were shot in Seal Beach. This house used to be the exterior of Gregory and Olivia's house. There is a section of Seal Beach called Old Town, filled with locally owned specialty shops, bars, and eateries that line 3 blocks of Main Street. Main Street ends at Ocean Boulevard, which leads into a beautiful pier. There used to be a diner called Ruby's at the end of the pier. You could feel the ocean moving the pier when you were dining. They had really good burgers. Sadly, the restaurant closed in 2013. In May of 2016, an electrical fire destroyed it. Severe damage was done to the end of the pier the restaurant sat on. It took 3 years for that portion of the pier to be rebuilt. It is used as a fishing pier today. Now on to the story that made national headlines and was a tragedy, but it should not taint this beautiful beach town. It took place at Salon Meritage. Even though the address is 500 Pacific Coast Highway, it actually sits on the corner of 5th and Marina Drive. It is one of a few buildings with the same architecture. The salon sits in a triangle-shaped business park bordered by 5th Street, Marina Drive, and Pacific Coast Highway. In 2011, Salon Meritage was the site of the worst mass shooting in Orange County history. It was a result of a custody battle that left an 8-year-old boy without a mother and a father, and several other victims were ripped away from their families. Michelle Fournier and Scott DeCry got married in Nevada in 2003. Michelle had 2 children in their 20s from a previous marriage, and together with Scott had a son. The couple separated in 2006. Scott was employed as a tugboat crewman and in 2007 suffered an injury to his leg when a tow line snapped and almost severed his leg. Extensive nerve damage ended his career. Shortly after that, Scott filed for divorce in Los Angeles County. The divorce was final in December of 2007. In 2008, Scott moved into the house in Huntington Beach. The custody battle of their sons started that same year, both sides accusing the other of various issues ranging from harassment, abusiveness, and in 2008, the judge ruled the 2 would share joint custody of their son. The attorney who represented Scott hadn't heard from him since 2009. In 2010, Scott had filed a lawsuit against the tugboat company and shortly after that received an undisclosed settlement. May of 2011, Scott was fighting for full custody. October 11, 2011, both Michelle and Scott attended a custody hearing. Scott was denied full custody. October 12, 2011, about 1:20 p.m., Scott walked into Salon Meritage and started shooting. The shooting lasted about 2 to 3 minutes and left 8 dead and 1 wounded. The first call to 911 was made at 1:21 p.m. Scott was pulled over at 1:26 p.m. by police at the corner of Center Avenue and 12th Street, about a half mile away from the salon. Scott did not resist arrest. His only words to the arresting officers were, "I know what I did." Search warrants were executed to search his pickup truck and home. Once in custody, he made a confession. He stated earlier that morning he and Michelle argued on the phone. He went to drop off paperwork at his son's school, then returned to his Huntington Beach home, where he armed himself with 3 firearms and a bulletproof vest. He drove north towards Seal Beach, stopping at Bolsa Chica State Beach, where he sat in the sand contemplating whether or not he should take out Michelle. Once he made up his mind, he drove to Seal Beach and walked up to 48 Michelle and shot her. 47-year-old Christy Wilson, an employee at the salon, was getting her hair done by Michelle at the time, and he shot her next, because the previous day she had testified against him at the custody hearing. The salon owner, Randy Fannin, approached Scott with scissors, and Scott shot him. He said he started shooting at random and considered the others collateral damage. Once Scott exited the salon, he saw 64-year-old David Coyote sitting in his car and thought he was an off-duty officer. When he saw him reaching for something, he assumed it was a gun. He shot David. Some of the salon customers were able to escape into other businesses near the salon. One woman ran into a building and locked herself in the bathroom and turned off the lights. Scott and Michelle's 8-year-old son was a second grader, and all of this was unfolding. He was sitting in the principal's office because no parent had come to pick him up. A month after the shooting, Michelle's 24-year-old daughter, Chelsea, was able to obtain legal guardianship and temporary custody of her 8-year-old half-brother. The night of October 13th, over 300 people held a candlelight vigil in front of the salon. October 14, 2011, Scott attended an arraignment hearing, and family members of the victims also attended and shouted various things at the man accused of killing their loved ones. Also on the 14th, biohazard cleanup had begun at the salon. Friends gathered next door to the salon at Patty's place to remember David, Michelle, and Christy. The 3 were regulars at the upscale restaurant bar. October 17, 2011 was a busy day in Seal Beach. Several Land Rover drivers lined Patty's parking lot to pay tribute to their friend David. He was part of an off-road enthusiast group who would gather places such as desert and mountain and drive their vehicles on trails and unmarked terrain. A wounded shooting victim, Hattie, was released from the hospital. She had been getting her hair done by her daughter, Laura Webb Alodi, that fateful day. Also on the 17th, several businesses started fundraisers to donate to the affected family, and by the 19th had already collected approximately $83,000. By October 27th, the fund had grown to $116,000. Witness accounts began surfacing in the press. On the day of the shooting, 4 men had just stepped outside after finishing their lunch when they heard gunfire. Instead of running away, they ran toward it. 2 of them had medic training, one having been in the Marine Corps and the other had training in search and rescue. They witnessed Scott casually walking out of the salon with a gun in his hand. At one point, he pointed the gun in their direction, but then shot David in his car. The men entered the salon, which they described as eerily quiet, and saw victims of what they called an ambush. They could still smell gunpowder in the air. They called out that they were there to help. One man started working on Laura, but she couldn't be saved. One man rendered aid to Hattie. Soon, 7 others who took cover during the shooting emerged from their hiding places in the salon. Police arrived within minutes of the first 911 call. A witness pointed out to the police a pickup truck leaving the parking lot as the shooters. That was how Scott was caught so soon. Once the police entered the salon and verified it was safe, the paramedics entered and began tending to the victims. 2 were transported to the hospital. 6 others pronounced dead at the scene. A man known as Homeless Mike approached the salon, apparently well known to the cops, who told him to get out after he crossed the yellow crime tape. However, Mike wasn't there to gawk. He was there to report that they had another shooting victim in the parking lot outside. Mike had heard the gunshots, and when he passed by the Range Rover, he noticed a man slumped over, struggling to breathe. David was transported to the hospital, where he later died. October 20th, the funeral of shooting victim, 54-year-old Victoria Buzzo, was held. She had worked at the salon as a hairdresser and married her high school sweetheart, David. She and her friend lived in Laguna Beach and had 2 sons. Friends and family described her as living loud. She had a contagious laugh, and everyone who knew her loved her. She loved her family, her home, animals, gardening, skiing, and swimming. October 20th. The first of 2 services was held for 47-year-old salon customer Michelle Fast. She and her husband Patrick had been married for 24 years. They lived in Seal Beach and had 3 children. She was a sports mom, and all of her kids participated in sports, and she was heavily involved in these activities, driving her kids to their events and volunteering to help wherever she could. She was also an athlete who would swim daily every morning at 5 a.m. She was remembered as having a beautiful smile, a hearty laugh, and a tender spirit. She was a lifelong fan of the San Francisco Giants and was thrilled when she got to see them win the 2010 World Series. Michelle's second memorial service took place on October 22nd. October 21st, Randy Fannon's funeral was held. Randy and Sandy had a home in Laguna Beach and a home on a golf course in Murrieta, California, where the couple would spend their weekends. They were married 17 years ago on a beach in Maui. In 1999, Randy and Sandy became co-owners of Salon Meritage. He was a father and a grandfather. He was remembered for his heroism that day and the last minutes of his life. He was described as being generous. He loved his family, golfing, and wine. He would play basketball with his grandson. October 21st, the funeral of 65-year-old customer Lucia Condas was held. She had been married to her husband for 42 years, and they lived in Huntington Beach. She was remembered as being kind and having a sense of humor. Many former co-workers recalled her work ethic and her wearing a Star Trek pin. After graduating college, she worked as a social worker in LA County. She then became an administrator for the OrangeCounty Healthcare Agency of Alcohol and Drug Abuse Services. She had been retired for 10 years at the time of her death. She and her husband were very close. They traveled often, loved cruising, and did crossword puzzles together every day. She loved reading, cats, pasta, wine, and traveling. October 22nd, the funeral for Christy Wilson was held. She worked as a nail technician at the salon. She and her husband Paul had been married for 23 years and lived in Lakewood. She was the mother of 3 children and had 1 granddaughter. She was remembered as a devoted wife, mother, and grandmother who loved to give hugs. She was described as being very loyal and had a wicked sense of humor. She created a jewelry line called Almost Famous. October 23rd, the funeral of 46-year-old Laura Webb Elodie was held. She worked as a hairdresser at the salon, and she also did nails. In 1979, her family relocated from Ohio to Huntington Beach, California. 4 years later, she graduated from Huntington Beach High School. She met her husband Ron 10 years ago, and they had just gotten married 9 months ago. Ron described Laura as the love of his life and said the 10 years with her were the best years of his life. She was a stepmother to Ron's 2 kids. She rode a motorcycle and loved hair metal bands. Friends described her as a free spirit who was a bit of a daredevil. She loved to give hugs, laughed loudly, and was a great listener. She was a huge Raiders fan. She made homemade pies and loved hosting Christmas parties. October 24th, the funeral for Michelle Fournier was held. She had a boyfriend. She was remembered as a doting mother who loved her 3 children with all her heart. She was described as having a bubbly personality, a strong, independent woman, and a trusted confidant. Her daughter said she made the best meatballs, and when she made dinners, she didn't sit down until everyone's plates were full. Michelle was planning the ultimate trip to the Amalfi Coast for her 50th birthday. November 19th, the funeral for David Coyote was held. He and his wife Paula lived in Seal Beach. He had 3 adult children and 3 grandchildren. Patty's Place was one of his favorite restaurants. He would eat there 3 to 4 times a week. He had previously worked at the Newport Beach Land Rover dealership. He was passionate about his customized Land Rover and the group of friends who he shared the same passion with for off-roading adventures. He was known as a nice, mellow guy who had a strong family traditions. He loved the outdoors and spending time with his family, teaching them about the outdoors. He was a trusted leader of the Land Rover group and would do anything to help those he cared about. He was also a Vietnam veteran. November 29, 2011. A continued arraignment hearing was held for Scott. His attorney entered a plea of not guilty on his behalf. Prosecutors were seeking the death penalty. Both Michelle and Christie's families filed wrongful death suits against Scott earlier in the month. The judge expected this to go to trial in April of 2012. December 2011. The Land Rover Club arranged a memorial run that raised $3,000 in memory of David Coyote. This group planned to make this an annual event. 56 Land Rovers participated in a 50-mile trek through the snow. February 2012. Sandy Fannin, whose husband was victim Randy Fannin, who owned the Salon Meritage. Sandy announced plans to reopen the salon. She is going to have walls removed and the inside gutted and remodeled. She said all the employees were a tight-knit group like family who spent time together outside of work and even gone on vacations together. She thought that is what Randy would want her to do, and she was determined to not let the violence and crime take over the goodness. On the day of the shooting, Sandy was in the back of the salon behind a wall mixing color when she heard screaming. Then her husband say, "Hold on a minute, Scott. Please don't do this. There's another way. Let's go outside and talk." Then she heard the shots. They stopped for a bit, and all she could think was running out to see her husband, and then heard more shots. When the shots finally stopped, she ran right to her husband and tried to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and kept trying and trying until the paramedics arrived and told her to stop because he was already dead. She sat there and held her husband after that. April 2012, Scott's mother, not pictured, filed a petition for co-guardianship of her grandson. She said she had not been able to see her grandson since a few days before the shooting. However, prior to this petition, Michelle's daughter Chelsea, along with her maternal grandfather, shown here, had already started proceeding to get permanent guardianship of the boy. May 2012, the judge ordered that some of the grand jury transcript be made public. The defense argued the documents were presented to the grand jury in a closed-door hearing and should not be released to the public, and his client would not get a fair trial. Some of the witness statements given to the grand jury that were leaked went as follows. One employee of the salon said he saw Scott enter the salon and walk up to Michelle and shouted, "This is what you wanted! This is what you wanted!" Then he started shooting Michelle and Christy. The witness and another person ran into a bathroom. While the witness was locked in the bathroom, he heard constant screaming and gunfire. Next, he heard Laura Webb Elodie banging on one of the facial room doors and begging Scott not to kill her. More shots rang out, and Laura went silent. Another witness who had been eating at Patty's place said a hysterical woman ran into the restaurant screaming to call 911 that someone was shooting at the salon. The witness testified when he looked out the window, he saw people running in a panic and saw a man with a gun with no expression on his face walk calmly toward a vehicle and fired into it before getting into a white pickup truck and driving off. One of the first EMTs to arrive on the scene said he had to step over the body of Randy Fannin, who was lying near the door while his wife was trying to resuscitate him when he told her to stop. Remember, Sandy had said she had heard her husband tell Scott to go outside and talk, and it appears that is what he was trying to do. The EMT went on to describe how he checked to see if anyone had a pulse. He said Christy was still in the chair where she was getting her hair washed, and Michelle was on the floor next to her. Both had no pulse. Next, he checked a woman who was lying on the floor near a hairdryer and found no pulse. The woman was a customer, Lucille Condas. He went and checked on a woman who was lying on the other side of the room and found no pulse. The woman was salon employee Victoria Buzzo. The EMT came upon a woman in a fetal position who was lying on the floor and still breathing. She was customer Michelle Fass. She was transported to the hospital where she died after 1 p.m. on October 13th. Hattie was next, and she had shots to her arm and chest. She was transported to the hospital and released 5 days later. May 2012. The hearing for guardianship over Michelle and Scott's son was held. Chelsea still had temporary custody, and along with Michelle's father, they were seeking permanent custody. Scott's mother was also seeking custody. The judge set a trial date for August 15, 2012. July 12. A judge granted Chelsea permanent custody of her half-brother. This was the outcome of the petition she filed to seek permanent custody prior to Scott's mom filing. It is unknown whether Chelsea and Scott's mother ever went to court in August, but at the time, both Chelsea and her grandfather said they would allow supervised visits and would not allow her to take the boy to see his father in prison or have any type of contact with Scott. July 2012, the first of what would become an annual event to honor Michelle Fast was held. It was named the Annual Swim and Paddle Event. It still continues to the current day in 2024, and proceeds are donated to the Seal Beach Animal Care Center. September 2012. In the darkness of what is considered the worst mass shooting in Seal Beach history, a love story emerged. One of 4 men who were the first to arrive at the salon after the shooting occurred, and before the paramedics arrived, had married a former employee of the salon. He met her at the funeral of Laura Webb Elodie. He was one who rendered aid to Laura's mom, Hattie, until the paramedics arrived. He met the hairdresser at Laura's funeral and became close to Hattie, who attended their wedding. October 2012. As the anniversary of the shooting approached, Scott had still not gone to trial. The public defender, Scott Sanders, was disputing information the prosecutor received from a jailhouse informant. The prosecutor said they didn't intend to call this informant as a witness, but they were going to introduce recorded evidence of Scott talking to inmates about the shooting. This raised huge red flags for the defense. They were questioning how the information was obtained and if the informant was being coached by the prosecution to strike up a conversation with Scott, and if so, that would be a violation of his rights. November 2012, a newly remodeled Salon Meritage reopened under new ownership. Sandy Vannon decided to sell the salon to a longtime employee, Irma Acosta, shown here. Sandy planned to work as an employee. Sandy and Irma are shown here with the camera crews. Irma had been working the day of the shooting, but had placed an order for a protein shake and had gone to pick it up when the shooting occurred. Jeffrey Segal, who also was a hairdresser at the time of the shooting, also had left minutes before the shooting began. He recalled how the day went on October 12, 2011. He arrived that morning at 8:30. The next to arrive was Victoria Buzzo. He recalled she always wore crazy outfits, and that day was no different. He said she had on a black shorts, a white shirt, and her hair in a twist, and asked her if she was going to tap dance, and then they both laughed. Gordon Gallegos, the employee who survived by hiding in the bathroom, got his hair done by Victoria, and it was always an event because he wanted it one way and she wanted it the other way. She always won. Jeff said that Gordon, Victoria, and Laura were all very good friends who worked at several salons together, and if one left, the other two followed. Paul and Christy Wilson came in around 10:30 a.m. Paul was there to get a haircut. Randy and Sandy came in next with supplies for the salon. Michelle Fournier came in next with a lemon cake. She told her co-workers about the phone call with Scott that morning and that he asked her to meet for coffee, to which she said no. Hattie came in and brought a pie. She started with getting her nails done and then wanted to get her hair done. Jeff Segal's 1 o'clock appointment canceled, and that was going to be the last one of the day. He told Randy he was going to enjoy the beautiful weather. The last thing he heard was laughter in the salon as he left. As soon as he got to his home in Long Beach, he got the text telling him what had happened. This bench that sits between Patty's and Salon Meritage shows plaques with David, Christy, and Michelle's name on it, along with other regular patrons of Patty's who have passed on. January 2013, Judge Thomas Goethals ordered the prosecution to turn over all the evidence regarding the informant and how the statements were obtained. This opened a whole can of worms, and it wasn't just related to Scott's case. This sparked a huge investigation into the Orange County District Attorney's Office and Sheriff's Department. March 2013 arrived, and no trial. This trial was postponed once again as the investigation into the use by the prosecution and sheriff's office was still ongoing. By September of that year, there was still no trial date set. This caused much grief for the victims' families. February 2014, shit hit the fan. The Orange County District Attorney's Office and Sheriff Department were accused of running an informant program dating all the way back to 2007, and there was at least 20,000 pages of exhibits to support this. May 2014, Scott pled guilty, but the penalty phase was going to be delayed due to the investigation into Tony Rackauckus, the Orange County DA, since 1999, and Sandy Hutchins, the sheriff. Sheriff deputies were accused of committing perjury. The probe revealed that Allegedly, sheriff deputies would give inmates special meals and prosecutors would offer reduced sentences and other privileges in return for information. June 2015, work began on a memorial site for the shooting victims in a grassy area of Eisenhower Park near the pier. It was completed shortly after that. The monument contains all 8 names of those who were lost that day. It is near the entrance of the beach parking lot and overlooks the ocean and pier. In 2016, the OC's use of jailhouse informants was being investigated at a federal level. The Attorney General's office had to step in to run the DA's office. October 12, 2016, the 5-year anniversary, Hattie gave an interview to the news for the first time. She expressed that this anniversary seemed to be the hardest and spoke about the case being stalled due to misconduct. She described that day she heard shots, felt pain in her arm and chest, and played dead. She felt someone next to her, which she thought was her daughter, Laura, but it was Victoria Buzzo taking her last breath. She recalled how Laura had just gotten married 9 months earlier. Here Victoria and Laura together at the wedding. Hattie considered Victoria as another daughter. At St. Anne's Catholic Church in Old Town, Seal Beach, the annual memorial for Michelle Fast and Lucia Condis was held. They both were members there. The priest will say a prayer for those who died. Then they will head to the memorial site at Eisenhower Park. Also in October, Attorney General Kamala Harris ruled that Scott's case be moved to the Orange County Supreme Court. The Attorney General's office would now replace the prosecution and the trial. June of 2017, Scott's defense asked the judge to remove the death penalty due to the prosecution's use of jailhouse informants to obtain information, which violated Scott's rights. Survivor Hattie and families of the victims held a press conference to urge the judge to accept Scott's plea. August 2017, Judge Goethals ruled that the death penalty would be removed and Scott would be sentenced the following month. September 22, 2017, the judge sentenced Scott to 8 life terms for murder and 1 count of attempted murder without the possibility of parole. The families got to speak out, to which Scott tried apologizing. Scott was taken back to prison to serve out his life sentences. Vigils in memory of the victims have continued on the anniversary. The victims are still very much remembered by their loved ones. Although the victims' families finally got to see Scott's sentence, they had to wait due to the misconduct that was uncovered because of this case, which turned into so much more. In 2019, a new district attorney, Todd Spitzer, was elected. He inherited the mess left by his predecessor, Tony Rakakis. The investigation into the jailhouse snitch was still underway, but Tony declared he would not wait for the Attorney General to decide former DA's misconduct. He began his own investigation, and by summer of 2019, cases where informants were used were retried, and some resulted in overturned convictions, which outraged families of other murder victims. October 12, 2021 marked the 10-year anniversary, and a memorial was held at Eisenhower Park. Hattie spoke as well as other family members. After the ceremony, the friends and family walked the pier and threw flowers into the ocean to honor the victims. October 2022, the Attorney General's investigation into what had become known as the OrangeCounty Snitch Scandal concluded, and it was determined that the Orange County DA's and Sheriff Department did indeed violate several prisoners' rights. The investigation revealed that the informants were used from 2007 all the way up until 2016. So even after the investigation began in 2014, these fools continued to do this right until the Attorney General's office took over in 2016. By October 2023, 57 cases has been reviewed, 35 of which were homicides and 22 were serious felonies. At review of these cases, some convictions were overturned. Some had the charges dropped and others received reduced sentences. As of 2024, cases are still being reviewed. Let us not forget, in all of this scandal, what truly matters in this story, and it is the victims and the friends and family who love them. May they never be forgotten. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you on the next episode.